Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to And She Thrived, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women, and we also aim to provide resources on wellness and healing for our female community. We are very fortunate today to have Jennifer Abdul-Rahman with us, a Muslim American convert, and she has been a registered nurse since 2010, contributing her expertise across diverse care settings. As an international board certification lactation consultant, she owns Latched Eternal Lactation Consulting, a private practice emphasizing a holistic approach to breastfeeding and addressing tongue ties. The founder of Feminine Wellness Collective, Jennifer draws from her personal hormone health challenges to empower women. Committed to education, she guides women in understanding their infradian rhythm, tracking cycles, and embracing the empowerment derived from connecting with their feminine nature. A perpetual learner, Jennifer passionately fosters spaces for women to explore birth, breastfeeding, postpartum, and feminine wellness topics. Assalamu alaikum, Jennifer. Welcome.
Walaikum assalam.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
So,
thank you for having me.
so I wanted to just tell our audience today that I actually ended up attending a presentation by Jennifer recently where she spoke about this, and I found her presentation so enlightening. And in the room, most of us were in our 40s, and most of
Mm.
us did not know this information. And I just thought, how is this possible that we as women have gone through life for so long without knowing these very fundamental aspects of our own bodies?
hmm
And what for me I find so fascinating is, as Jennifer will continue to explain today, is that the female cycle, it's just like the patterns we see in nature, such as the tidal, the waves of the tides of the waves of the ocean, or the changing of the moon, or the seasons. And we are not linear. We fluctuate like that, and we have to become very attuned to that, because in order to attain wellness, and as you know, on this platform, we focus on all types of holistic wellness, which incorporates the body, the spirit, emotions, the mind. It's everything, right? And so she's going to be explaining how it's all connected. And it's actually fundamental. It's fundamental information that we all need. So I really urge all of you to watch this full episode, inshallah. Okay, I hand it to you. So my first question for you, Jennifer, is why is this knowledge so pertinent to women? Maybe I half answered that, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I really feel like if we understand our cycles, and I found this across the board between birth, postpartum, lactation, everything, that we just don't understand what's normal and not normal with our bodies. And when we don't understand what's normal, everything seems abnormal or off, or it seems like it's a problem. But if we understand what is normal, what's supposed to happen when, we can kind of lean into that and actually be empowered by it versus feeling disempowered. And for our menstrual cycles, each week of the month is going to be different. So some weeks, your workflow may be different, and that's okay. But just knowing that, not feeling discouraged on that week, like before your bleed happens, when you're feeling really unmotivated, you don't want to work, you don't feel like you can overcome the challenges that week, not letting that affect you, on a personal level, and just understanding that, that's just the week you need to rest. So things like that, as throughout the month, if we understand what's actually normal, it actually helps to empower us to be able to manage our lives a little bit better and, have different expectations each week. The first thing I kind of wanted to touch on is the difference between our circadian rhythms and our infradian rhythms. So all humans have a circadian rhythm. It's a 24-hour cycle where our bodies know that we are supposed to be awake during the day and asleep at night. And our bodies produce melatonin based on that and produce hormones during the day to help us stay awake. For men, their circadian rhythm rules. So they wake up in the morning, testosterone is high, peaks in the afternoon, testosterone decreases at night, melatonin kicks in, they sleep comfortably. Rinse and repeat every 24 hours for men. So their circadian rhythm rules. For us, we do have a circadian rhythm. However, our 28-day infradian rhythm is really what drives our hormones and our body and our work abilities and our mood and everything that we experience throughout the month.
Okay.
And infradian rhythms exist all over nature, just like you mentioned. Certain insects, animals, they go through their own infradian rhythms. Butterflies, for example, their transition from a caterpillar to a cocoon to a butterfly is part of an infradian rhythm. It essentially means change and fluctuations throughout that kind of metamorphosis. So every month we go through this infradian rhythm, and that's unique to women. That's not something that men go through. So for us, each week is different. Each week of the, our 28-day cycle. And some people may have a cycle that's a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. As long as things are balanced, it's within a normal range. But typically the cycle is defined as 28 days with the nuance that it could be a little shorter or a little longer for some women. So our infradian rhythms are broken down into 4 stages, with the menstrual stage is the start of our 28-day cycle or our infradian rhythm. And that is similar to the winter. So the way that we feel during our menstrual stage is like our winter. So we use the seasons metaphorically to relate to each stage of our cycle and to know how to work during each stage, what foods are good for us, what workout routines, how our mood might be, our temperament, and things like that, so that we can kind of make our cycle work for us. So during the menstrual phase, that is similar to our winter. Follicular phase, which comes after menstruation, is similar to spring. The ovulatory phase, which comes after the follicular phase. So ovulatory is ovulation, when the egg is ready to be fertilized and it's been released from the ovaries. That is like our summer hormonally. We feel, like we're in summertime. And the luteal phase is the last phase right before menstruation, and that is similar to fall. So the menstrual phase lasts on average about 3 to 7 days. Some women can go a little bit over 7 days, and it really depends hormonally, what symptoms are there, how hormones are balanced, what might be normal for that person specifically. But on average, the menstrual phase typically lasts about 3 to 7 days. Less than 3 days can be problematic, and more than 7 days, 7 to 10 days can sometimes be problematic. So it really just depends individually on each person's hormone symptoms and what their normal cycle looks like. And during the menstrual phase, this is a time to rest. So really turning inward, taking the time for self-care, for rest, decreasing the amount of things that you might do socially during this time. Your lowered hormones do improve communication between both sides of your brain, but you also may need some extra sleep during this time and extra rest. And during your menstrual phase, it helps to think of things as warm and comforting. So whatever you can do for your body that is warm and comforting, whether it be drink tea, eat soup, stay in bed, curled up under a blanket, things like that that are going to comfort your body and bring comfort to you. Spirit-wise, meditation, increased dua, things like that during this phase are really empowering for our spirit. And self-care during this time. So it can be things like nourishing your body through soups, stews, low glycemic foods, root vegetables, roasting and bacon. So just like, we're in Northeast Pennsylvania. So during the winter, it's very cold here. Root vegetables are very abundant. So it's really common traditionally in this area to eat more roasted vegetables just because of wintertime. So even throughout the whole year, you can think of your menstrual phase as winter, and lean in more towards those roasted and baked foods. It helps to increase protein during this time.
You mentioned that the low glycemic foods because the metabolism slows down?
Yeah. So when we get to the luteal phase, we'll kind of see that transition where during the luteal phase, metabolism picks up in preparation for menstruation. And then once you hit menstruation, your metabolism starts to slow down. And then as you go into your follicular phase, metabolism is actually much slower than it is in the luteal phase. So those like low glycemic foods can be more nourishing during your menstrual phase. Yep. And you can increase protein at this time. Some people lean in more towards red meat or things that are high in iron. If they're feeling that iron deficiency, their body naturally goes more towards those foods. Increase in healthy fats just to help with brain function during this time. Sunflower seeds are great, grapes, watermelon, which are some prophetic foods as well. And then movement. So this is really important. And I know we talked about this and I hear this from women all of the time that they're like, oh, I went and took a really hard aerobic class while I was on my period and it did not end well. Um, so during this time, rest, yoga, walking, stretching, just really, really light workouts are more beneficial. Sometimes harder workouts during menstruation because your body is already taxed by menstruation. Harder workouts can actually increase your cortisol levels. And when cortisol levels go high, our body kind of goes into anxiety mode, fight or flight. Our body finds it harder to enter that, parasympathetic rest and digest mode. So doing anything that's minimal and light during this time as far as movement is going to be more beneficial for your body. Some good teas and supplements during this time are raspberry leaf, which is a uterine tonic. So it really helps actually with cramps. And that's red raspberry leaf. And then nettle is great because it has a lot of vitamins and nutrients in it. So a lot of B vitamins, things that your body may be deficient in during menstruation, nettle can help to replenish your body. Quercetin, magnesium is also really important during this time. Most of us are magnesium deficient. So magnesium can actually help with cramps. It can also help with insomnia, and it can also help if you're having any joint pain or muscle tenderness during this time. Topical magnesium, which is like a cream or a spray that you can apply to your skin, really helps at night to help with insomnia as well. And then next comes the follicular phase. So after we've experienced our winter, we go more into spring, just like the natural progression of seasons. This phase can last anywhere from 7 to 10 days on average. And during this phase, it's like a new beginning. You can start new projects during this time. You might find that you wake up earlier and it's easier to wake up earlier during this stage of your cycle. You have an increase in oxytocin and dopamine. So this is a really feel-good stage of your cycle. A lot of women go from maybe menstrual or premenstrual where they may experience depression and just a poor mood and just feel really run down. And then as they enter their follicular phase, that increase in oxytocin and dopamine really makes them kind of feel alive again. Body-wise, plant-based can actually mimic the body's natural estrogen. So during this time, estrogen is rising in preparation for ovulation. So eating foods that actually can mimic the body's natural estrogen and help support that estrogen rise. And then also preparing the microbiome and estrobiome to prepare for ovulation. So gut health is a really big thing in health and wellness today in general, but especially for hormones. Your gut is one area that helps to actually detox hormones from your body as you're shifting through these different cycles. So estrogen rises, but eventually estrogen needs to leave your body so progesterone can rise. So during this time, helping to prepare your gut and prepare your microbiome in your gut and fill it with good bacteria so that it can help those hormones to leave your body when it's time to. This is a great time to prepare for that. And then spirit-wise, this is a great time to kind of set and anchor your plan.
What I found quite interesting is how you use the word to detox, because that's something that we have never been told, that you're supposed to detox hormones. You just think that they're just there and then they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
But the way that
like where did they go, right?
Right, but the way that you phrase it is almost as if there needs to be a process to support the elimination of that, and that in itself is a detoxification. If you don't, you can have, for example, a really bad period, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you're going to bring this up later, but you were saying in the presentation that it's not normal to have painful menstruation. It's an hormonal imbalance. So that's something that I'm sure many of us are interested in, is that why is it abnormal and how does one make it normal? So
yes, exactly. And that's part of it too, is where we've kind of always just been taught so long, like through society, culture, even medicine, that painful cramps are normal and painful periods are normal and heavy bleeding and really long periods, that all these things are all some type of variation of normal, but they're actually not. They're a hormone imbalance. And that's something that's kind of hard to cope with as well, because a lot of women have been told that for many years and suffered for many years, not knowing that, there was probably an underlying hormone imbalance causing that. And the GI system So for people who are like chronically constipated or have constipation issues, that's a major issue with detoxing hormones because the hormones aren't detoxing how they should. So that's one of the things that I always talk about a lot is fixing your gut if you do have gut issues, bloating, things like that, trying to fix that problem so that your GI tract is actually running how it should to help detox those hormones. So this time in your follicular phase is also a time of renew and rebirth. So nutrition-wise, you can nourish your body with fresh and vibrant fermented foods. The fermented foods help with good bacteria, so that's going to help support that microbiome. Fresh and vibrant vegetables, fruits, those are all great during this time to help nourish your body. Vegetables, sauteing and steaming vegetables can be easier on your body to digest during this time since your metabolism is slowing down a little bit. Lean protein, sprouted beans, seeds, foods that have natural phytoestrogens to help support that estrogen rise. So cruciferous vegetables, for example, broccoli is one of them. Anything that is considered a cruciferous vegetable is going to be great in helping to support estrogen. And then movement, this is where you can, you're coming out of your menstrual phase into your follicular phase. You're feeling a little bit better, have more energy. You can start doing things like cardio, dance, cycling, hiking, going for maybe walks that are a little bit more strenuous than you did in your menstrual phase. Teas, golden milk, turmeric is great. Turmeric is a great anti-inflammatory. So those are good things during this time and really helping to support that estrogen rise. And then we hit ovulation. So the ovulatory phase, on average, can last about 3 to 5 days. And during this phase, emotionally, you might feel more open during this time, open to new experiences, open to social gatherings. And this is likened to your summer. So mind-wise, this is a great time to pitch new ideas, celebrate, connect with others. You may find that you can still wake up fairly early during this phase, and it's easier to wake up early. You may feel the inclination to be more social during this time. It's also great to promote antioxidative well-being, so helping to build those antioxidants within your body to help with the detox that's going to come in the next stage of your cycle and to help support your ovaries to produce a healthy egg. Spirit-wise, you may feel like you're more open to receiving during this time. And it's also a great time to flush cortisol. So cortisol is that stress hormone. And we always want to have low cortisol, but especially going into the next phase of our cycle, we want our cortisol to start to come down because high cortisol, when we're at a stage that we are beginning to turn inward, high cortisol can counteract that process. And also when flushing cortisol, we're boosting oxytocin. So this is also a great time, like fasting, prayer. This is a great time to increase those types of things.
So in terms of bringing down the cortisol, what would you say other than doing breathing techniques, exercise, anything else that you would mention about bringing down cortisol? Because as we have said, that it's the cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which ruins everything. It ruins our hormonal balance. It ruins your gut bacteria. It ruins everything.
Yeah, a lot of it is stress management. So, that's part of where finding what things in your life are possibly causing more stress, what things can you let go of, what things do you need to be focusing on during that time to lower cortisol. And cortisol it's interesting with hormones that when we don't have to work on all the hormones at one time. We just need to pick the one that is causing the most problems and just work on fixing that hormone, because when we fix one hormone, the others fall in line. So one of the biggest things with cortisol is lowering stress. So finding out, what those triggers are for you and helping to eliminate or reduce some of those triggers. Eating a balanced diet really helps with cortisol. Food can heal and food can harm. So there's definitely things that we put in our body that can increase cortisol. So for some people, it may be caffeine, coffee. So, I'm not saying don't drink any coffee, but maybe if you're having 4 or 5 cups a day, maybe try 1 or 2. And, that could even, and everyone has different sensitivity levels to caffeine. So that's something that could help to reduce cortisol as well. getting enough sleep is really important. So the recommendation is 8 hours of sleep. So if that is something that is really impactful for you, where you are really struggling with sleep, that's a good thing to focus on. Sometimes just getting better sleep can really help. And maintaining like a good bedtime routine, kind of having a routine at night, whatever that looks like. You know, maybe it's prayers, journaling, listening to Quran or something soothing before you fall asleep. That can help to ease you into sleep and then also reduce cortisol at night. Even just being with other people, like even just being with other people, laughing, having fun, those are all like feel good ways, like whatever's going to make you feel good during that time. And interestingly enough, in your ovulatory phase, you're more likely to want to be social, which is a great way to reduce cortisol as well.
That's interesting.
So
I just heard
yeah.
this morning that I believe that data has shown that more so than exercise, what increases happiness is our social interactions. More than exercise, surprisingly.
Yeah, that's amazing actually that it can have that much of an impact. And it's also interesting that like in your ovulatory phase, we're looking to reduce cortisol and you're also more likely to want to do those things. So this it just kind of, it really comes together during that phase. Um I do find for a lot of people like the
I don't
yeah,
know.
go ahead.
I've heard somebody else say that when women spend time with other women in women's groups, it actually increases their estrogen.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense because research has shown too that like when women spend time close together, their cycles tend to sync up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably, like that estrogen rising all at the same time, and then they're syncing their cycles.
Oh,
So it's impressive. So during this time too, like foods as far as nourishing your body, raw fruits and vegetables are really great. Lighter meals, less calories. Your metabolism hasn't started to speed up yet, so you may feel that lighter meals, less calories are feel better for you during this time. Movement, you can start to increase exercise. So things like kettlebell, HIIT workouts, boot camp, cycling, kickboxing, all of those things are, more high impact activities. And that's a great time during ovulatory phase. Even, increasing weightlifting as you go into your luteal phase. Teas, milk thistle is really great. To move this, I don't
yeah,
know.
for people who don't know, milk thistle is liver cleanse.
Yeah. So milk thistle's great. Oat straw is really good. You may feel during ovulation that you can tolerate caffeine and chocolate better, just because the way your hormones are balanced, you might be able to handle chocolate and caffeine better. So this is the time, even though we're looking to kind of reduce cortisol, you might be able to handle those things better during this time. And then the luteal phase, which is the last phase, right before menstruation again, is about 10 to 14 days on average. And this is like your fall. So you're coming off of your summer during ovulation. You want to kind of focus in on those projects that you want to finish up before you enter your winter. So work during your fall, organize, finish projects, being really detail oriented, better. You might notice that you actually have better focus during this time. Stress management is great during this time to start to implement those things that you'll need going into your menstrual phase. And then kind of starting to cancel unnecessary meetings. You might find solo work to be more beneficial during this time. You might feel less collaborative and more into just working by yourself during this time. Body-wise, your metabolism is going to start to speed up, so more calories may be needed. You may feel hungrier during this stage of your cycle. And then you're kind of preparing for menstruation. And spirit-wise, gratitude and kind of begin to turn inward. So thinking, whatever your gratitude practices might be, and starting to turn inward and prepare for your winter. And then getting things done. So foods, root vegetables, again, complex carbs, your metabolism's a little bit faster, so your body's going to be able to handle those complex carbs and digest them a little bit better. More calories, mint, roasting, bacon, spirulina, those are all great things during this time. Movement, you can still do kind of the higher impact, HIIT, bar, Pilates, weightlifting. And we'll talk about the late luteal phase, which is the couple days right before your period. Those are the days where these types of movement might get a little bit more difficult to do, but your body will let you know. You'll start to feel it if these workouts are too hard, and you'll start to know when that phase hits. Certain teas that are helpful during this time, cinnamon, ginger, honey tea, cinnamon lattes, nettle again, ashwagandha to kind of help prepare for that downward shift in hormones towards the end of your luteal phase. And then vitamin C is also a great detoxer. So the vitamin C can actually help to detox the estrogen after ovulation and help to kind of help the estrogen to leave your body as well. So we went from one phase, increase in estrogen. Now in the luteal phase, we want to help with that detox of estrogen. And then that late luteal is about the 4 to 5 days before your bleed. This can be a little different for everyone. Sometimes for me, I notice it's maybe 2 to 3 days, but you may start to feel that downward shift in hormones where maybe things felt good, felt steady. You felt like you were getting things done. And then all of a sudden you kind of feel unmotivated. Maybe you feel depressed. Your mood has, significantly dropped. A lot of women always describe just kind of feeling like, why am I here? What am I doing? What is life? And that's just that natural drop in your estrogen. Estrogen and progesterone both drop at the same time during this time. And both of those are hormones that make you feel good in different ways. So when both of those feel good hormones drop significantly, it can really lead to more of kind of a depressed mood. But when we understand why that's happening, it feels less chaotic every month.
So you were saying that the estrogen is the happy hormone, like the love hormone, and the progesterone is more calming. So those are both plummeting, and that's how we feel like we hate life. And what is our
Yeah.
purpose? We are doomed, and everything is bleak. And this is when you want to initiate a divorce with your husband.
Yeah.
Okay. But the thing is then when it's dropping, is anything replacing it, or you just mean that the intensity, like the quantity has dropped and there's nothing, it's not like it's being filled with something else. It's just kind of less in quantity, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's less in quantity. So you still have estrogen and progesterone at that time, but like when we look at the graph, it's like a significant, like progesterone is like this, and then it's like
Summit.
completely downhill. So it kind of flatlines right before menstruation. So you still have that estrogen and progesterone a little bit, but it's because it's such a steep decline right at that point, and both of them are coming down at the same time and kind of plateauing. That's where we kind of get those abrupt feelings where it feels like one day everything's fine, and then the next day everything's not fine. And the one way that we can know when all this is happening is by actually tracking our cycles, by tracking the symptoms that we have, by tracking whether it's, cervical fluid, whether it's temperature checks, whether it's LH testing to test for ovulation, whatever that looks like for, whatever the preferred method is. When we track our cycles and we know what stage of our cycle we're in, we can prepare for these things. So like I mentioned, for me, if somebody's invited me to a social gathering, I am checking my calendar and counting the days and seeing, am I going to be in my late luteal or menstruation at that time? Because if I am, it's an immediate no. Because I just know I've done it. I'm like, maybe I can do it, but then I do it and I regret it every time. So I track and I know where I'm at in my cycle, and I know when I can do certain things and when I just know it's not going to end well for me. So that's something about just knowing where you are at in your cycle and knowing what you can handle during that time and what you can't. And it's okay to say no to things.
And what's interesting is that, as Jennifer might explain, is that many of us think that our ovulation is pretty much halfway through like 2 weeks after your menstruation, because a lot of these menstruation apps predicted for that. But as she's going to explain, that that's not necessarily true. It might not all be like that, and that's why you have to utilize specific ways to track your personal cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And what the research shows is that and it varies between different research studies. It's about 10 to 13%, depending which study you're looking at, but only about 10 to 13% of women actually ovulate on day 14 of their cycle. And women can ovulate, the range is anywhere between day 11 and day 21 of their cycle. So a lot of these apps that are out there, they predict based on, you put in the day you had your period, and then you put in the next cycle, the day you had your period, and then they calculate ovulation as day 14. But that's not true for the majority of women. So the app that I use, it actually it tracks based on your symptoms. And you don't have to use apps. You can use paper charting. There's ways to paper chart, so you don't even have to do it on your phone. But when you track it and you see, where you're at in each stage of your cycle, your ovulation day could be very different than what a lot of these apps and things like that were telling you was your ovulation day. And when we don't know when our ovulation day is, that kind of impacts where we, how we can't know where we're at in our cycle then. If we're not knowing where that ovulatory phase is, because we know where menstruation is. So then, okay, maybe the next week is follicular, but if you ovulate sooner or ovulate later, then you're not really sure where your ovulatory or luteal phase is at. And a healthy fertility is more than just pregnancy. For a lot of women, they don't start thinking about this until they're ready to get pregnant. And then maybe they're having trouble with infertility or trouble getting pregnant. And then they start thinking about, oh, well, when am I ovulating? But really, every woman should know when they're ovulating. And statistically, only about 3% of women actually do know when their real ovulation date is. But the importance of knowing ovulation is so that we can better support ovulation, because it doesn't matter if you're trying to get pregnant or not. It doesn't matter if you're in your teens or early 20s or in your 40s or 50s. You supporting a healthy ovulation puts your body into a state of optimal health and well-being. When you have a healthy ovulation, that means your hormones are well balanced and you're in a state of good health and well-being. So that's one reason, to focus on when is your ovulation, even if you're not planning for pregnancy or, not married, not looking to
Not
get pregnant.
married. Exactly.
Yeah, like you should still know no matter what. And it's something that should start with girls much earlier. Even when they first start getting their period, they should start to learn how to track these things, so they can understand their body and understand, what symptoms come along with these stages. Because then when something is off, we can address it sooner rather than going 10, 20 years before finding out that it's a problem.
Mhm. The other thing I wanted to mention, which you mentioned in your presentation, is that unfortunately, for many women who work, they are expected to function like men, where you're going to work every day and you are behaving the same way, you're putting maximum input all the time. But as this shows, is that we're not like that. We have certain phases of very high productivity, and then you literally have to almost like shut down and go inward. And I think that's very important, because not everyone can do it, but as much as they can, to manage their work schedule to complement their cycle, their infradian rhythm. And also, if you can't, just to have more compassion for yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that, because I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do all the things. And, I always, like, in my follicular phase and ovulatory phase, I could get like a month's worth of work done in those 2 weeks. But then as I start to, wind down into my luteal and menstrual phase, I have no motivation to do work. I just kind of want to, do things for myself during that time. And, that's okay too, to do more self-care during that time. But yeah, absolutely, having more compassion for yourself during, those stages of your cycle.
Mhm.
So I think we talked about at the meeting too some different ways that you can track. So cervical mucus, temperature checks, LH testing, these are all great ways. And typically when people are starting out with this, I usually recommend that they do 2 different ways to track, just as like one is tracking and then one is a confirmatory track, to kind of confirm what the other method is, until you get used to your body and get to know your body, because this process is like getting to know your body all over again, because most likely whatever you thought you knew was maybe not accurate. So you're kind of really getting to know your body again. So you might need like that the one way to track, and then also a confirmation way to track, until you get used to things. And then you can start to even better predict for yourself. Like I always know what my symptoms are going into different phases. So as soon as they start to happen, I know I'm going into that phase, just because I am so in tune with my body now and how my body feels and how my mind feels. I'm able to track things that way as well. So these are things that I usually talk about as, everyone kind of gets this information, but then they're like, what do I do first? How do I manage this? How do I do this? How do I make this happen? And one of the things I always recommend is just pick one thing to start with. Like doing everything all at once, it usually doesn't go well because you're just trying to do too much. So just pick one thing to start with, whether it's diet changes, if that's the easier thing, endocrine disruptors, which I didn't go over here, but endocrine disruptors are essentially what we put on our body, what we put in our body, our environment. And some of these things we can't control for. Like if you live in a more city, urban type of environment, there's going to be air pollution. There's going to be pollution around you. That's not something we can control for. But what you put on your body, what you put in your body, those are more things that, the water you drink, where your water is coming from, is it filtered, what you cook your food in, what you store your food in, those are things that, we can more control for. So
we should just stop and mention there, Jennifer means like your cookware. So do not be cooking in Teflon and other very high toxic things, but to rather use things like ceramic, stainless steel, right? What else?
Yeah. So like cookware, as far as nothing that is like has a coating that can come off or a coating that can leach into your food. BPA is a really big thing. So any containers that have BPA, canned food, you'll notice on cans now it'll say like BPA free. So that's a better option, because if you have cans, they're stored for months, that BPA is just leaching into the food. And BPA is a really big hormone disruptor. Like we even have, research that shows if women consume foods that were in like BPA containers when they're pregnant, it can actually transfer to the fetus and cause brain abnormalities after birth.
Wow.
Yeah. So
no storing in plastic, less usage of plastic, but rather using glass, metal.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned the cleaning products, which are highly toxic and also disrupt your hormones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that's like has preservatives, dyes, scents in it, like artificial scents, like candles that you may burn that are artificial, those are highly toxic. Yeah, air fresheners, absolutely. Anything with like chemicals that's emitted into the air can be hormone disruptors. Cleaning products, anything that doesn't have I try to go for either making my own cleaning products at home, like vinegar and a few essential oils and some water makes a great cleaner. So using either making things or using things that have the least amount of ingredients possible or low toxic ingredients. I think there's actually an app that I had that you could scan barcodes and it'll tell you like on a scale how toxic the product is and what chemicals are in it. So, that's also another option just for like if you're trying to track chemicals that are in products. And then what we put in our foods that we eat, and then also what we put on our bodies. So personal care products, makeup, shampoos, face washes, all of those things can contribute if they have chemicals in them. And our skin is our largest organ. So we absorb everything so readily through our skin, and then it enters our bloodstream and can impact our hormones.
Deodorant, that just right by your breast.
Yeah, deodorant's a big thing, and especially because it's right near the breast as well. So deodorants that have chemicals are really big contributors to breast cancer because of the area where the chemicals are being applied, and it's so close to the breast tissue. So that's another big one as well. And for some people, they may find that choosing supplements at first until they can make diet changes might be a better option. So, I always support like the changes in nutrition, but for some people, it takes time to do that. And if you want more immediate results, sometimes go on the supplement route, and it can be as simple as taking vitamin D, fish oil, maybe some vitamin C, B complex, just, basic vitamins and nutrients that we kind of all need. If you're like even a probiotic, a daily probiotic, if you're not able to do like the fermented foods all the time or things that can contribute to the good microbiome food wise, you can always do a probiotic. So those are always kind of just like some basic things that can really help support the body. And then start tracking your cycle, and it can be just tracking symptoms at first. It can be, tracking your bleed, and then maybe, cervical mucus. It can be temperature tracking, whatever that method you want to start with. Just picking something to kind of start to get a baseline idea of where your cycle is at. And then start doing some research. So, everyone is not the same. Everyone's hormones are different. Everyone reacts differently to hormones. So you might find as you start looking into infradian rhythm more and start listening to what other people are saying, you might find that you can relate to them on certain things that you've also experienced, and there might be a solution for you. And being intentional about why you want these changes. So I think anytime we do anything, being intentional about it helps put us in a good position to implement the changes and actually make a difference. And also fixing your liver and your gut. So the liver and the gut are like the two main organs that really help to detox those hormones and process toxins out of our body. So we're always going to have, be in contact with toxins or endocrine disruptors, like just in our environment, it's going to happen. But if the liver is functioning really well and optimally, it's going to help to flush those toxins out a lot better. And also the liver can help with hormone detox, and especially the gut, like we talked about, can help with hormone detox as well.
Yes, and as I mentioned before, that one of the things that supports liver detoxification are coffee enemas. So that's also another thing you could
I
add.
have not tried that one yet.
And I just do want to mention that what's coming up for me that is so essential is that how it is absolutely necessary for us to take our health into our own hands. And you cannot rely on the medical system, especially in this country. You go to the doctor and they spend maybe at maximum 10 minutes with you, and they're just going to give you all these things which are band-aids. Even you yourself said that the contraceptive pill is a band-aid because it's manipulating your hormones to make it constant. So you essentially become like a man and you're functioning like a man and you're not with your waves. And but it's not solving any hormonal imbalance or issue that you might have. So essentially, do your own research, and you need to become like your own healer, your own doctor in many ways, at least for the bulk of your health, to take responsibility for that. So, yeah.
Yeah, this was the slide that I had on, like, if it's something like a combined pill, the hormones that are in it are synthetic hormones. So it's not even our natural hormones that our body makes. And then when you're on it, like this blue line is the progesterone and the orange line is the estrogen. They're just baseline the whole time. So they're just completely flat. And then the bleed on a pill is actually a withdrawal bleed from the hormones. So it's not like a true period that you would get if you weren't on some type of birth control. So it kind of, it kind of flatlines everything to prevent the follicle from developing and to prevent ovulation. So there's no ovulation that happens when you're on birth control. And for a lot of women who then choose to go off it and kind of take their health into their own hands, there can be a time where things seem worse for a while. And it's literally just a shock to the body to be receiving hormones again. So, I always caution people, like, if you're doing that, work with somebody to kind of manage that part of it, because things can feel worse for a little while, and you might feel inclined to go back on the birth control because things felt good, but it's just because the birth control is not solving the underlying problem. It's just masking, temporarily masking it until you eventually go off it, and then all of those issues come back if no other changes were made. And this is what the hormones should look like. So we have, the LH hormone, FSH, estradiol, which is estrogen, progesterone, these things fluctuate and go up and down throughout the cycle. And that's how they naturally should be during our cycle. Okay. Yeah, so I always like to show this picture of the uterus because I think, and it was funny when I did this at I think it was funny when I did this at the presentation because a lot of the women were like, wait, what is that part? And what is that part? They're like, wait, where's the ovary? So, it's one of those things that we don't often know what our own anatomy inside looks like. But there's some interesting things about it, and it is good to know it because it's good to know why certain things happen. So, like, one of the things we talked about was, when you're in your ovulatory phase, even though you're the most fertile on your day of ovulation and the couple days after, you can actually have a couple days before ovulation where fertility is starting to increase. So sperm can actually hide in the vagina. There's these crevices within the vaginal wall, and sperm can actually stay in there for a couple of days. They can last pretty long. So if the egg drops down like 3 days later, the sperm can go up to meet it and fertilize, even though the act did not actually occur on that day. You can get pregnant on that day because the sperm were still, alive in there. And that's the point of the cervical mucus. The cervical mucus, increases pre-ovulation and then during ovulation to help make it a more susceptible environment to fertilization of the egg. And the whole time, the follicular phase, the reason it's called that is because the lining of the uterus, so this kind of like red part, this red part right in here, this is the uterine lining, and that's what builds during the follicular phase to help, make it a conducive environment for an egg to be fertilized. And the egg at the time is actually still in the ovary, and the follicle is building. And then once it's released, it comes across into these fallopian tubes. So there's actually space here. So the egg is released from the ovary and it comes across into the fallopian tube and gets sucked up by these little finger-like projections and then comes into the uterus and then eventually meets the sperm if that happens, and will attach to the uterine wall. If it doesn't attach to the uterine wall and the egg does not become fertilized, then as you go into your luteal phase, that is where things are going to start to prepare for menstruation. And then when menstruation happens, that lining of the uterus, that built, is going to then shed out. So that's the blood that's coming out, is that uterine lining that is now shed in because the egg was not fertilized. And interestingly, during different stages of the cycle, the cervix can either go higher or lower during different stages of the cycle. So that part of the anatomy can change throughout a cycle. And actually the external os here that it leads into the cervix, that can be more open or closed at different stages of the cycle as well. So there's a lot of changes that the uterus itself can go through throughout a woman's cycle.
So just to clarify, so if a person is having very painful periods, are you saying that that can be remedied by diet and supplementation? Or is there something else that we're missing there? Because if someone might say, well, I have a stellar diet and I'm taking all the supplements and I still have to take my ibuprofen.
Yeah. So typically PMS type symptoms, so cramps, even like drastic mood changes, very heavy bleeding, they're typically due to an estrogen progesterone imbalance. So either progesterone is too low when it should be higher, or maybe estrogen is too high when it should be lower. So that estrogen and progesterone are imbalanced in some way, and they're not at the right levels that they should be at during those specific stages in the cycle. So that is one thing that contributes to the PMS symptoms or possibly heavy bleeding. Even the uterine lining, if it builds too much, that usually indicates that there is an imbalance in the hormones, where the uterine lining is building so much that we then have this really heavy bleed. And that's part of that estrogen progesterone imbalance. The interesting, or go ahead.
How to fix that?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is, like, one, it's tracking symptoms. Two, it's finding because tracking the symptoms, if we know what symptoms are happening at what stages of the cycle, then we can kind of start to pinpoint what hormones might be out of balance. And then when we try to fix those hormones, it's kind of trial and error sometimes, unless we do like hormone testing, and we can clearly see which hormones are out of balance. Some of the times it can be trial and error, where we might start some of the basic supplements, like just, the everyday things, like the vitamin D, the B complex, the omega-3s, or like omega vitamins, starting like those basic ones to make sure the body's just being nourished on a basic level. And then also tracking symptoms to see what symptoms are happening when, because there might be symptoms that are happening in the luteal stage that are not normal because the hormones are not balanced there. But in the follicular phase, everything might be good. So that's where we can determine, like, is there a problem in the follicular phase? If there is, that means that there's an issue with estrogen rising. So we may not be consuming enough of those foods with phytoestrogens that are going to help with that estrogen rise. But then some women are fine in their follicular phase, but now in their luteal phase, they're having like extreme PMS symptoms like really early, before that late luteal even. They're having PMS symptoms already. Or some women right after ovulation, they're having maybe a really steep decrease in hormones because the estrogen is not detoxing like it should. So it kind of depends on when the symptoms are happening, at what stages of the cycle, and what we're seeing as far as symptoms, and then also what we're seeing as far as length of each stage. So if we have a menstrual cycle that is like 14 days, there's something unbalanced there. So we would look more to like focusing on each woman's individual issue. And that's where tracking symptoms really helps. Like when I first started tracking, every single day I would just, open up my phone, make a note, or try it in the app, like how I felt that day, energy wise. Was I feeling any type of physical ailments or GI stuff or, anything, and then kind of tracking and seeing where those things are leading. And also for some women too, it could just be a detox problem. Like if their GI system is not set up to properly detox the estrogen, it could just be a detox issue. And if we work on that part of things, then we might see improvement with, menstrual issues. So it is something that's like very individualized for each person because everyone's body reacts differently to hormones. And also the issues that people have can be so wide and varied and also be in different stages of the cycle. But tracking symptoms is a big one, finding out what symptoms are happening where. Hormone testing, the one hormone test that I recommend is a dry urine test. So you can do blood testing or you can do dry urine testing. The thing is though, is that the hormones should be checked in the later end of the luteal stage. So it should be like the later end of your cycle. There's like a couple days window, usually like late luteal or right before late luteal, where we would check hormones, and that's the prime time to check it. If we're checking at other stages of the cycle, we might not get an accurate read-in of what the hormones are like. And sometimes it helps to have blood test and dry urine at the same time to try to, compare and see how things are resulting. The other thing that's really interesting is diet. I think we talked about this the other day too, where we can think we're eating a really great diet, but we might not be getting the right things from the right, food sources, or the food source itself may not be as nutritious as we think, even if it's organic. One thing for me that I found is when I was overseas, I was eating such a heavy diet in meat, and it was really good for me, and it had a ton of fat in it, like healthy fat, and avocados and all of these things that have healthy fats, tons of fish. And then I came back here and meat and fish is way more expensive. It's not always as available. So I wasn't eating as much of that stuff, and my cycle started to space out again. And as soon as I put healthy fats back into my diet, more avocado, butter, ghee, full fat yogurt, heavy cream, more meat, my cycle within just 1 or 2 cycles was back down to 28 days just by incorporating healthy fat back into my diet. And I thought I was eating fat, but what I didn't realize is that they take sugar out of food. They take, all this stuff out of food. And then you think you're eating something that should have fat, but it had all the fat taken out. So it's sometimes even reading labels, it can be confusing to know what you're supposed to eat and not eat.
Wow, it sounds pretty complicated. It sounds as if someone might actually need a coach to help them
Yeah.
do this because it's overwhelming to do it on your own, it seems. There's a lot going
Yeah.
on,
So
right?
I do, yeah. And I do offer counseling sessions for women if they're looking into exploring, this type of transformation and working on their hormones, just balancing things in their life. I started the Feminine Wellness Collective, and it's every third Thursday at 7 p.m. So it's just a place that we can kind of come together and chat in general about, different topics related to hormone wellness, feminine wellness, anything that, connects with any of this. because so many things in our life connect to our cycles. And then I do offer individual counseling sessions for women if they're looking to dive deeper into their own hormone concerns, and looking to kind of remedy some of those situations. So it is something that I do offer services for as well if people are interested in that.
Wonderful. I'll definitely be adding your information. And I thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time. And I hope and pray that all of you have benefited. And we would actually love to connect with you again to zoom in onto certain topics in more detail. I think that'd be very useful. Inshallah.
Absolutely, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I wish you and your
You're
family all the
welcome.
best.